Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. Nobody knows how angry I am. I've been filming for 3 hours and I have zero footage for it because something has gone wrong each time. I was a bit blurry in that camera and I thought that everyone's gonna complain. I won't upload that. I regret everything. I refilmed it 3 times and every single time something's gone wrong. So this is we're doing it. If I'm blurry, welcome to hell. Welcome to your hell. You are stuck with me, slightly blurry, slightly out of focus, because we are all in hell together today, okay? We're just all in the middle of Dante's hell. Which realm we are in today? We happen to be in Limbo. Also, look at you little nerds like me. Who would have thought so many people would have wanted to listen to me talk about Dante's Inferno? Other people are just as dorky as me. I absolutely love it. So, last video, in episode 1, we passed the gates of hell, stepped onto Ferryman's boat, and made our way into the first few pages of Inferno 4 of Dante's Divine Comedy. At the end of the last canto, Dante fell asleep, but he's woken in this canto by the sound of a thunderclap, only to find himself in complete impenetrable darkness, surrounded by the painfully, horrifically sad sounds of the echoes of infinite lamentations. As they alight the boat, the pair, Virgil and Dante, descend into the first circle of hell, Limbo, where the unbaptized virtuous pagans dwell. Their only sin is not accepting Christ, or, in many cases, being born before Christ, or being born geographically in lands where Christianity was not practiced or had never even reached. So such a sin, in Dante's eyes, was not deserving of torturous eternal damnation, which is why they are not harshly punished here. The only punishment in Limbo is deprivation. But before we get into Dante's Inferno, I want to take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. So whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy for you to create a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything from products to time, all in one place and all on your terms. If you're new to building websites, you don't have to worry. You can design a gorgeous, unique and professional looking website tailored to your brand thanks to Squarespace's blueprint. And with Squarespace's integrated optimized SEO tools, you can get a new website launched and discovered quickly. And you don't need to know anything about coding, thank God, because Squarespace's next generation website fluid engine lets you just drag and drop your content where you want it, whether you're using your mobile to design your website or on desktop. And if you're a creative who sells courses, you can do it all on Squarespace. You can upload your videos and then add a paywall and set your own prices, whether that's a subscription service or one-time fees, whatever works best for your brand. So if you want to expand your business or build a really cool blogging website, go to squarespace.com for a free trial. And then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Lady of the Library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. The word limbo means edge or hem, hence why we are still really on the margins of hell as we know it. Now, Dante's conceptualization of limbo pushes the Catholic imagery into a more original realm. For Catholic theologians, it was purely a space where unbaptized babies dwelt, a belief which still exists pretty much today, as the fear of being put into limbo was the only reason I was baptized. My parents weren't even religious. I know, bonkers. That's how much the fear of things like this get into people's brains. Limbo for Dante is much more complex than that. It's a space for the mitigation of damnation from virtuous non-Christians. This move from Dante may seem quite trivial to you and I, but in the realms of Christian theology, big deal, massive deal, huge. The church taught that only unbaptized children and those who had been faithful and had anticipated Christ before his coming would end up in limbo. The Catholic religion believed in limbus patrum, which is limbo of the fathers, the temporary condition of Old Testament saints as they waited for their liberation by Christ, which we'll see actually happens in this canto, not literally, but is referenced. And they also believed in limbus infantum and limbus puerorum, which is the limbo of the infants and the limbo of children, which was the permanent condition of children who had died, sadly, prior to baptism, but were only in limbo because they hadn't been washed of their original sin. Compared to Christian limbo, Dante's limbo was incredibly generous by allowing adults and non-Christians into limbo. And of these figures are those Dante believed lived lives of extreme moral virtue and intellectual accomplishment. Dante's Limbo is a melting pot of significant historical and literary figures across cultures, and contains everyone from Hebrews to Romans, Greeks, Egyptians, and Muslims. Basically, anyone I'd like to have a dinner party with is in Limbo. So if you want like a really cool party, that's where you to send your guest list. It has everyone: Homer, Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, Democritus, Diogenes, Anaxagoras, Thales, Electra, Camilla and the Penthesilea, Empedocles, Heraclitus, Zeno, Dioscorides, Euclid, Hippocrates, Galen, Horace, Ovid, Lucan, Aeneas, Caesar, Latinus, Lavinia, Brutus, Lucretia, Julia, Marcia, Cornelia, Cicero, Seneca, Ptolemy, Saladin, Avicenna, Averroes, Adam, Abel, Noah, Moses, Abraham, David, Jacob, Isaac, Jacob's sons, and Rachel. This girl, she's just there. Anyway, all of them are mentioned in this realm, and this is also the place, Virgil tells Dante, that he should be, were he not serving as a guide. Now, those were a lot of names. And if you've read the Iliad and the Aeneid, it may give you new flashbacks, potentially not happy ones, to the catalogue of the ships, the epic trope which Dante is emulating here. See, much like the ancient poets, Dante catalogued their names to preserve them, because that was the role in epic poetry, to preserve that which was culturally and socially significant. These figures for Dante aren't sinful. Their only sin was not being a Christian, and Dante believed that they had a place in the afterlife even if they weren't allowed into heaven, and a nicer place. Dante's heart bleeds for the souls here, as he deems their damnation, based solely on their lack of Christian faith, quite unfair, a controversial take for a medieval Christian to have. Has anyone, Dante asks Virgil, escaped from this place and achieved blessedness? Well, yes, Virgil tells him. Once a powerful spirit came this way, crowned with the insignia of glory. He took away the shade of our first parent, with that of Abel and his son, the shade of Noah and Moses, Abraham and David, Israel, his father and children, and Rachel. The event that Virgil is speaking of is the liberation of the Hebrew matriarch and patriarchs by Christ, who took the biblically righteous from the Old Testament up with him to heaven. So as the pair walk through the forest of Limbo, Dante spots a light in the distance, a single fire. And as they walk towards the light, Dante sees a great castle, encircled 7 times by lofty walls and surrounded by a pleasant stream. And across from the stream is a meadow of cool grass, and it is there that he sees the great non-Christians, the intellects, the poets and philosophers, standing. They who have an honoured reputation, still favoured on earth, Virgil tells Dante, are given grace by heaven, which is why Dante the poet ensures their names live on and remain honoured by cataloguing them in this poem. He wanted them to remain in limbo and given the peace of this upper realm of hell, demonstrating Dante's quite wholesome concern for acts of inequality and exclusion. Dante's concern for exclusion based on one's birthplace is actually covered in more depth in his unfinished work, The Banquet, Convivio. This philosophical treatise revolves around the metaphor of a banquet, quelle surprise, and in it he covers many topics, from his decision to write in Italian over Latin, his views on St. Augustine and Aristotle, vices and virtues of mankind, the arts, and so on. When reading his Divine Comedy, many people lean on The Banquet for insights into Dante's personal life, as there are many punctuations of the autobiographical throughout the poem, as you can see. And in The Banquet, Dante acknowledged the advantages that he was given being born in Florence, and writes of the educational disadvantages that many face when they are born in places lacking access to education, a university, or isolated from educated people. But let's go back to Limbo, and let's talk about 2 of the significant things in this canto, or 2 significant people, in my opinion. Dante included Islamic figures in Limbo, specifically Avicenna and Averroes, 2 figures who are rarely spoken of in Western discussions of philosophy, and actually just in general. So let's talk about them, because these 2 people were incredibly intrinsic to the development of the Western Renaissance. If you want to feel inferior at all in life, then look no further than to the works and accomplishments of Ibn Sina, known in the text and more commonly by the bastardization of his name in Latin, which is Avicenna. Born in 1980 CE in a village of Afshana, ruled at the time by the Samanid Empire, Ibn Sina was a polymath and considered by many as the first major Islamic philosopher. By the age of 10, he'd already memorized the entirety of the Quran, and by 18 years old, Ibn Sina was already an expert in philosophy, theology, and jurisprudence, and had a reputation as a physician. His major work, the Canon, continued to be taught as a medical textbook in Europe and the Islamic world from the 12th century all the way until the mid-17th century. He's developed his own form of Aristotelian logic, one using reason and rationality to establish the existence of a god. In his work, Proof of the Truthful, he argued for the necessary existent, something that cannot not exist. Everything outside the necessary existent, he theorised, was contingent on the existence of something else, which is its cause. So, for example, you only exist because your parents existed, and they only exist because their parents existed, and they only exist because their parents existed, etc. So he maintained that God, the principle of all existence, was pure intellect, and from whom other existing things such as, our minds, our bodies, and basically all other matter emanated from. The idea that we all come from one singular matter is a theory that still stands today with the Big Bang Theory, though to ascribe that one matter to God without explaining God's source of obvious existence is where the plot holes came in. And it's the same theory that we've been discussing for hundreds, thousands of years, even to this very day. It's part of the old school debate, isn't it, of what can come from nothing. Yet ironically, the next chap that we're going to talk about was critical of Ibn Sina. He criticised him for his theory because it relied too heavily on metaphysics and rather than demonstrable laws of nature. Most of his work, or where he had his biggest impact on the Renaissance, was Ibn Sina's discussion of the soul, which caught the attention of Thomas Aquinas and Albert the Great. So based on his theory that intellectual thoughts were indivisible, he proposed that the soul was an incorporeal substance, meaning that coherent thought cannot be had in parts by different intellects and still remain as a single coherent thought. So because he understood that corporeal matter was divisible, indivisible intellect necessary for coherent thought could not be corporeal, so thus Ibn Sina explained that the soul was immortal and did not die along with the body. Which leads us on to Averroes. It would be an understatement to say the Apostolic Palace in the Vatican contains some of the world's greatest and most famed pieces of artwork, and one of those is the famed fresco by Raphael, The School of Athens, painted between 1509 and 1511. Most of us know the painting for the iconic central figures, the elder Plato, deep in discussion with the young Aristotle holding his Nicomachean Ethics. The building in the painting, where the great thinkers occupy, is in the shape of the Greek cross, which many argue demonstrates the harmony between pagan philosophy and Christian theology. And the pair are surrounded by some of the greatest thinkers in history. We have Pythagoras, and Michelangelo as Heraclitus. I like that kind of blend there. Parmenides, Diogenes, and Archimedes, to name but a few of them. However, one very overlooked figure who stands out amongst the rest in some ways, whose quiet little nature leans over the shoulder of Pythagoras, dressed in green with a golden turban on his head, is an Arabic man, and that is Ibn Rushd, known more commonly by the Latinized version of his name, Averroes, who's considered today as the father of rationalism. Ibn Rushd was born in Cordova in 1126 to an influential Andalusian family. Now, Ibn Rushd we know less of the insights of than Ibn Sina because he never wrote an autobiography, but he wrote extensively in medicine, logic and philosophy, including natural philosophy, astronomy and metaphysics, psychology, politics, just to name a few hobbits, and is also famously known for his Aristotelian understanding of the human soul and the belief that humanity as a whole shared a single intellect. I know, I won't even finish my bloody PhD, and here he is. I just feel like such a massive failure looking at this man's body of work, but okay. So in this canto, Dante calls Ibn Rushd the man who made the great commentary, referring to his work on Aristotle, works which influenced other Christian thinkers such as Thomas Aquinas again. Though I should stress that just because he was influential does not mean he was respected. standard racism and all that. You see, Ibn Rushd had a concept called the possible intellect, which he theorised reflected the immortality of the human soul. But such concept leaned into the idea that there was a possibility for species immortality of the human race rather than individual human soul immortality. So Ibn Rushd believed that we as individuals die, but our thoughts live on. But he argued that the only true form of immortality was philosophic thinking. And this theory also posited that if we as a species bore an immortal soul, rather than individual souls being immortal, that meant that the actions and beliefs of individuals had no bearing on whether or not they would achieve eternal life, which, as you can imagine, was not popular amongst many religious folks. That kind of just a lot of theories about being good, immortality, living on, all that jazz. He was like, nah. So naturally, his Latin name Averroes soon became the term Averroism, which was seen as synonymous with atheism in medieval Christianity, as you can imagine. And by the 1260s, the term Averroist was used as a pejorative. The charge of Averroism was one of the most serious accusations that could be made against a medieval thinker. And here we have Dante placing Ibn Rushd as an honourable position alongside many admired thinkers such as Aristotle and Homer, and such an association would therefore lead to people believing Dante was an Averroist, even though most critics today and academics today don't believe he actually was. I think he just liked his work. That seems to be the consensus from what I could see. However, other people didn't see that way. Dante naming Ibn Rushd directly in a Christian-themed text and in a positive light was seen as a major red flag, and the belief that Dante was an Averroist was one of the reasons why Dante's book on monarchy, De Monarchia, was burned in 1329 in Bologna by Pope John XXII, and why the Catholic Church officially placed the text in its index of forbidden books in 1554, and that wasn't removed until the 19th century, believe it or not, because by then, basically most people have forgotten about Ibn Rushd and Averroism, and they just decided to take it off. So you're probably wondering, like me, how did Raphael get away with painting a portrait of Ibn Rushd in the Vatican itself? Well, that was probably likely something to do with not only him, but who he painted it for. You see, the 26-year-old Raphael was called upon by Pope Julius II to redecorate his personal apartments, and the fresco sat in Julius II's private library, which is very likely why it survived to this day, because only 6 years after the fresco was finished, Martin Luther began the Protestant Reformation, challenging the Catholic Church's teaching, and then a couple of decades after that, in 1542, came the Roman Inquisition, which prosecuted individuals accused of crimes relating to Catholic religious life or alternative beliefs, or secular beliefs for that matter. So the fresco, existing within a private space, kind of remained safe from the masses, and it's probably one of the only reasons why we still have it today, thank goodness. But yes, that is probably why. But I still couldn't find much about what the Pope Julius II thought about Ibn Rushd, but maybe he didn't even notice, but I doubt that. I don't know, I couldn't find any research into it. If anyone knows anything, please let me know, but I was struggling to find any associations with him and Averroism or his thoughts on it, but maybe he was just an intellect who enjoyed reading about that side of philosophy and didn't take it too seriously. I don't know, I couldn't find anything. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching it. I'm really hoping it's recorded this time. The audio seems to have recorded, which is great. But until next time, hope you are happy and healthy. Thank you to my patrons, as always, and I'll see you soon for another video. And remember, books save lives, so keep reading.